Hello and welcome to our daily sketching routine. It is Monday, December 9th, 2024, and today's topic will be basically figure drawing and how to get better at it. We could all use the practice and we can always improve, and I have some thoughts about it and stuff. So this page, I don't think I ever made an actual video about this page. I may have skimmed through it. I think I sketched this on camera and a while back because I had started this page in October and I had to go in and adjust the face, as I can see right here. So yeah, if you're using pen, it's good to have a whiteout, some kind of way to fix your mistakes. But it's going to be a lot of stuff. But before I begin, welcome back if you are returning, and welcome if you're new. I sketch and post every day and over a variety of topics, but it'll center around sketching, drawing, and painting. And I use timers to stay focused and to build a habit. At this point, it's just part of the routine. So I'm going to do a 10-minute timer. So if you want to use that as just a way to sketch for 10 minutes, you can do that. But yeah, let's get to it. I find, because I'm also learning about making videos every day, I find that it's good to warm up. There's different approaches. I mean, I started this page in October, so you can see that I haven't drawn on anything else. So one way to warm up is that way, is just to kind of go back to a page that you started and work on it. So as I'm looking at this, I might think there's lots of different things. So these were from reference, so these poses, and I did them pretty quickly, maybe a minute. So that's one thing to practice, is to do a minute sketch, and then with that in mind, I'll just kind of warm up basically and do like a minute or quicker. But one thing that you can do, and you meaning all of us, is you can look at what you drew here and just do different iterations of it and different understandings of it. So by that, and again, because it is warming up, it could be something like, if I see this, so I think I sketched that from a picture, I might decide to keep the same proportion, meaning I'm going to, oops, not on camera, I'm going to keep the same height, like basically the same proportions. However, the approach can be a little different, so I might decide to be a little bit more deliberate with the sleeve area, or just kind of do a different approach to it. Maybe think about how I might render it differently. Or just change it up in some way. Part of it's just to warm up. But you can see how even just approaching it differently can have an effect. So I wouldn't think too much about it. And that's the other thing too, to get better at stuff like this. And I want to do figure drawing because it's a popular subject matter, and also it comes up a lot, especially in my work. And we're going to move towards, in this video, just drawing from imagination. But yeah, you got to warm up to it. And that's a big part of what this will be about, is one, I mean, it's going to focus on figure drawing. So there's just plenty of reference, so that's not the issue. So these 1-minute sketches are good, but in and of themselves, like, they only take you so far, but they're good warm-ups. And that's what I'm doing here, is just kind of, again, just using this, because when you have something to look off of, so this is about maybe 30 seconds to a minute from reference, and then I went in and fixed the face, and I was using a pen. But if you want to use a pencil at first, you can do that. It's up to you. But that's part of what I'm going to also talk about, is just ways of, it's not so much ways of challenging yourself, which it is. I mean, I'll talk about how to make it more challenging. It's not always about that. It's really about understanding ways of getting better. So just going back over this, that was basically a gesture or a thumbnail, and it was done very quickly from reference. This is a warm-up and approaching it more as a study. So it's using this original sketch, and not everyone wants to draw from imagination. I don't always need to or want to, just like this wasn't. But ultimately, the idea is to know how to draw. And the idea about the challenge, so you can see I'm just using this as reference, kind of, I mean, as a starting point. So anyway, that's one way to get warmed up. But yeah, like, the idea of the challenge could just be just to make it more fun. Just because it's called a challenge doesn't mean it can't be fun. So yeah, that's a warm-up. Another approach, so part of this is, I might call this getting better at figure drawing or something like that, and just kind of keep coming back to that focus, that topic. I mean, you can spend your whole artistic life learning how to figure draw, so that's why it's so interesting, and it is a popular and also a broad, but also a deep topic to explore in art. And it doesn't have to be figurative. I wanted to do this because I had been drawing non-figurative stuff, such as clouds and fire. Basically textures is what that is, and environments. So another thing is so maybe I can jot down some notes here for you, and for me, for us. So gesture, this one is like study. So this was kind of a study. It was a study in mark making. But yeah. The gesture meaning stuff like, I'll take this as an idea, but then a gesture could be something like doing another version of the same. So this is like a gesture drawing. Without reference, this was initially a study, basically, is what that is, because that was from reference. So this is a gesture. So again, you could do it from reference, then you could take that and just kind of see if you can do another version of it. This one was basically the same thing, except I stuck closer to the initial gesture. This one is a gesture, but made up, but using that as a guide or inspiration. So that's 10 minutes. I might just kind of stick with this for 2 or 3 days or however long. Maybe this week will be about figure drawing. Alright, I'll start another 10-minute timer. So that's gesture. And then the next thing would be proportion. So honestly, when I see pictures that don't look strong, like if the drawing isn't strong, it's because the proportions are weird. And proportions can look like anything as long as you know what you're doing. So think of it as ingredients, with that analogy I seem to love to use of cooking. It's just the ingredients, the proportion of the ingredients is everything. And ultimately, if you think about it, that is kind of what cooking is how much of the ingredients are in the recipe really changes. I mean, of course, there's like what the recipe is, but that's like saying, like figure drawing is the thing, like the type of thing that you're cooking, but then the proportion of the ingredients. So figure drawing has certain ingredients. So it has things like the anatomy. So we'll just put that anatomy. So by that, I'll just draw a little figure right here. You have the head, you have the shoulder, torso, you've got the hips, you've got the legs, the feet. So this is the anatomy of it. Meaning, if this were cooking, let's just go with that analogy, it would have certain things in it that would let you know what kind of food you're cooking. So this is figure drawing. That's the figure. Now, once you know what it is that you're wanting to create or draw, then there's the proportion. That's why this looks the way it does. So you can replicate the proportion. Now, you could do this off of a photo. My stuff is kind of stylized realism, as I like to say. So you can just go off of these proportions. So it's stylized, meaning it's basically realistic, but like not really. Like I have room to modify it. Like they look a little cartoony. So I'm just working off of like the proportions. So let's do a different kind of proportion. So if you kind of keep the same height, but you can change up the proportion. And that's what sketching is good for. Is this kind of thing. Because you're not going to know until you do it. And then you're thinking, okay, so I'm going off of kind of a basic proportion here, which is like, I mean, the figure drawing playlist has all of this stuff. Plus there's a gazillion tutorials and different ways of approaching it. So figure out these proportions first. So if you're going to go, and you can get proportions from anything, because that's how you learn to cook stuff. You would ask, well, how much of this ingredient do I put in? So we talked about the ingredients, which is like, we talked about the individual ingredients, so like the torso. So if that's the torso, then you also have like the hips, and so you would just ask what shape and what's the proportion. So like I said, I kind of have like a standard, but if I were drawing from a photo or trying to make it look like a specific person, then I would just adjust the proportion accordingly. And if you want to make it more cartoony or more caricature, then you would just exaggerate it. And so adjust the proportion. Don't worry so much about the shape. Just make sure the proportions is what you're actually controlling, because it's the skeleton. So that's part of the anatomy. It's the skeletal structure. So this person could be just sitting. And this is just proportions. So this is the mannequin, which is what the stick figure is. But we'll get into all that. So that's what proportion is. Like if the person is sitting like this, it's going off of like the proportion, because if their legs were extended, like you're just using the proportion to figure that part out. Like if they move the leg. And that's because this person looks like this. You can change the proportion. So if this is the basic, so we could have two people, the king and the queen. You can make the proportion smaller for the smaller figure, and then so it's like the shapes inside the proportion, which is again kind of like the skeletal structure, can be different. Hopefully that makes some sense. So again, the gesture. So this is like the gesture. you can do studies, meaning I only knew how to draw this because I've seen it. That's studying and remembering. So that's what a study is for. It's not meant to make you have to look up reference all the time. Like, that's not really, I mean, you can do that, but if you're wanting your work to be more original, you see what I'm saying? Like, it's not that drawing the king and the queen, which happens to be something that I'm gonna do a lot of, is drawing that kind of thing, because of my story is a fantasy story, like medieval inspired. So it's not that is so original, but it's that the way I'm drawing it is what's original. And I'm just going to extrapolate the way I approach drawing or art into like writing the story. It's the same kind of thing where the writing of it is different. Like, that's what makes it interesting. Not that the topic itself isn't that interesting. I mean, obviously, if you're into it, into this kind of thing, then into the topic, then so that's 10 minutes. I'll start another one. That'll take us into 30 minutes, and I might just keep it kind of like that and just do like 30-minute videos to not overwhelm me or the viewer. So yeah, gesture, do some studies. So if I get this far, I might decide to look up something and just see costumes, or the other way around, which is what this is, just do a study off of a picture, but be able to basically create a character is what you're going to do. If you want. That's what I want. That's the way I approach it. The other thing would be, yeah, like proportion and anatomy. That's how you can basically, so I drew this and I had to fix it, but now that I did, so I was happy with that. I would have kept fixing it if I wasn't happy with the basic look of the face right here. So if you know the proportion and the anatomy, meaning like the facial features and like the skull and everything, that's the anatomy. The proportion part of it has to do with, I can zoom in on the face, and proportion comes in handy. Again, it doesn't, this is kind of realistic, so that's why I'm drawing it this way. Because part of that is my style. That's what I like. So I'm just going to stick with the proportion. So that's how you do that. And since it's just a thumbnail, and I just like the proportion of it, because that's why it looks the way it looks. It's because of the proportions. The anatomy is just like the features, the exact shape of like the nose or the eyes or something. I mean, another way to think about proportion, it's like the design of it. So if the proportion of the hair is like this, the actual shape, which is like the anatomy of it, I can make up. And just to kind of go along with the idea of drawing from imagination, it's the less you have to think about, the more you can, because I think like thinking itself it takes work. Like, that's work. So if I don't have to think about what I'm drawing right here, then I can make up stuff. Like I'll have an easier time like making up like the hair or like the details or like the facial features. And yeah, thinking about like the drawing and stuff. If I didn't have this, it'd be harder to come up with that, although you can. But it would be a different approach, which we can get to in another video, which is basically drawing straight from imagination. So there's that, and then that's the main thing I want to go over. The other thing would be like the different stages of sketching or drawing. So one is the sketch. So for example, this, pretty much everything on this page, that's the sketch, meaning I'm not worried so much about rendering, I'm not worried so much about anything else other than, or shading, other than I care more about the proportion, like this stuff. That's the sketching part. And so sketching is really about exploring and also answering stuff, answering questions that you have, like the drawing questions. So the next thing is kind of what I was starting to do, which is we'll call it, it's not really rendering, because rendering kind of encompasses several things. So the next thing would be, I'll call it shading, for lack of a better term, because I'm not really a teacher. I'm just kind of sharing information here. This is stuff that I'm practicing. So shading is stuff like the values. It's part of rendering, just like sketching is part of drawing. So shading is rendering, but so is sketching, is part of the rendering. So this is stage 2, or the second pass. It's good to, this is for your own sake. I mean, you can approach it however. This for me is just a way of, it's kind of similar to note taking. I mean, it's whatever works for you, as long as you get what you need from it. And then the third stage would be like, I'm going to call it detail. So this is all rendering or drawing. We'll call it drawing or rendering. Because let's say you draw something but keep it like pretty simple, kind of outlined, kind of like this. Like I could just leave that and it's a drawing, but that's the way I rendered the drawing. Now, if I kind of came up with a face, so I sort of invented that based upon this thumbnail, I can make it the same person. Or similar. Part of this also has to do with the way it relates to this is there's different types of sketching also. So this is like a thumbnail sketch. So I'm not really that happy with the proportion here, so I'm just gonna sketch over that. So that's kind of what I mean, like it's a thumbnail, so I can get away with doing some of this kind of thing. just kind of sketch over it like that. And if you keep it small enough, like a thumbnail, then it's okay. Like, it doesn't look that bad. But then let's say you wanted to redraw that, again using the proportion stuff, you can make it more. So notice, if I'm going to draw it better, I'm going to think about the proportion. That's what's going to make it look better. And again, this is still a thumbnail basically. It's just the zoomed in version of that. So to me, this is how I can actually learn from the sketch. Because another thing that I notice is that people sort of repeat the same mistakes, and then they want to say like, well, that's the style. Like, it's not really the style. It's a mistake. Like, it can be drawn better than that. So yeah, I wouldn't use that as an excuse. So that's another 10 minutes. That's 30 minutes total. I just wanted to get something started because it's a new week and everything. So I'll kind of focus on this, and then tomorrow I'll just, well, off camera, I'll probably just do some studies, because see, like that, now I have something kind of interesting, which I just made up from imagination. So I'll see what I can come up with, and then fill this with some stuff tomorrow. But yeah, I want to thank you for joining me today for our daily sketching routine. If you like these videos, please support the channel by liking or subscribing or commenting. And until next time, keep on sketching.